Hello, and welcome to Manthano Parenting Conference. I'm really happy to see each and every one of you. My name is Karen Aroma, and I'm so excited for this session. The reason being is because I am a parent with two children that are actually transitioning now from college into university. And so it's time for me to renew my job description, as Jim would say. So I'm really going to get my pen and paper ready to take down notes. So I'm really excited to have Jim. Welcome, Jim, to Manthano Parenting Conference. We are really honored to have you here with us today.
Karen, it's great to be with you. I can't believe you have kids that old. You must have started having babies very, very young.
Oh, you're making me blush. Thank you.
Anyway.
Well, Jim Burns is the president of HomeWord. He speaks to thousands of people around the world each year. He has 2 million resources in print in 20 languages. He primarily writes and speaks on the values of HomeWord, which are strong marriages, confident parents, empowered kids, and healthy leaders. Some of his most popular books are Confident Parenting, The Purity Code, Creating an Intimate Marriage, Closer, and Doing Life with Your Adult Children. Jim and his wife, Cathy, live in Southern California, and they have 3 grown daughters, 2 son-in-laws, and 3 grandchildren. He is here to discuss his new book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children. Welcome, Jim, once again.
Well, again, great to be with you. And it's an important subject to talk about. Even when people have younger kids, we've got to prepare them to become responsible adults. And so I've become a fanatic on talking about this subject.
So really, what inspired you to write this book?
Karen, I wish I could say it was deep research. It was desperation. So my kids were transitioning just like yours. My kids kept saying, well, we're adults, so treat us like adults. And Cathy and I would say, well, they're not acting like adults, and we're still paying for a lot of things. And anyway, we ended up just in desperation trying to read everything we could, and there frankly wasn't a lot out there. And then a friend of mine asked me to speak at a big conference, major conference here in the United States on that subject. And I said, no way, but I'll sit in the first row and listen. And he said, well, we prayed about it. We want you to seriously to do it. So he talked me into it. And that became a journey. I started talking to parents, and their kids were violating values. Their kids were straying from faith. Their kids were saying, I'm an adult, but not acting like an adult. And so as I started hearing that more, and at HomeWord is the largest provider of parenting seminars for churches in the United States. And so all of our speakers would say, we'd talk about what's going on, and we might be talking about younger kids, but somebody would come in and say, well, what about the child who's making the transition from teenage years to the adult years? And so I started speaking on it, and it has now become a deep passion of mine, but it was really desperation. I'll just be honest with you. Cathy and I are like, I remember Cathy saying one day, I didn't see it going like this, because our kids, great kids, raised in the church, wonderful kids, but all 3 of them, I have 3 daughters, so we have no hormones or drama in our life, of course. But all 3 of my kids made some bumps. They made some choices that we wouldn't have hoped for them to make, kind of just as they were entering into the adult years. And, even today, when I was studying, and I actually studied in Great Britain, but when I was studying with my research and PhD, we never talked about what we call emerging adults. And now today, that's another phrase. You've got teen years, and now you have emerging adults and then adulthood. And so this is a unique time. And parents have never parented an adult, and kids have never been an adult. So, we don't really know what to do. So I thought if I could just give them a little bit of a resource, we're going to talk about it now, but I could just give them a little bit of a resource. So that's why I'm fanatical about it personally, but then also I just see so many parents wanting information and wanting to make it right. I thought about this the other day, that with my own children, we will probably spend more time with them as adults than any other stage, of course, in life. And, Cathy and I invested 2 decades, a little bit more than 2 decades of our life with our kids in one phase, and now there's a new phase, and we've got to figure out how to do it, and so did they.
Likewise, likewise. So in your book, you've given us 9 principles to help parents have an adult to child relationship. And can you list those 9
Yeah,
principles
sure.
and share what it looks
Yeah,
like?
I'll share some of them, and then we'll bring them out as we talk as well. But the first one, parents don't love this, but I just say you're fired. And what I mean by that is, of course, you're still mom and you're still dad, but your role as a parent has to change. And I think it comes from the parent. So the parent has to give those young adults the passport to adulthood. And to say, even if you're not acting totally like an adult, I need to give you this passport to adulthood. And really, we have to rewrite the script. So there's been a script. The script starts when you have a baby. And then when you launch them. Now, by the way, that's only 936 weeks. From the time you have a baby until the time you launch them to adulthood, 18. It's 936 weeks. That's short, But the script definitely changes because they're getting ready to become adults, and they want that as well. Now, there's a lot of complications with that, but part of it is we have to learn to release them, give them that passport to adulthood. And we don't do that very well. We don't do it very well in Western Europe, in Great Britain, in America. They do it better in places like Israel, because they have a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah. And back in the day, if you would have Jesus, it was age 13. My kids were not ready at 13 to be adults. But at age 13, they say, now you're an adult with all the rights and privileges of an adult. And that's why they have that. There's other cultures that do that better than us. And so I think it comes as a shock. But that's the first principle. The second one, and I would say this is the one that gets people kind of shaking their heads, is unsolicited advice is usually taken as criticism. And I think a lot of us as parents say, why, we're giving them advice. We've been giving them advice for the last 20 years. Now we're giving them advice and they're taking it as criticism. And what they're hearing is something different. Parents have great intentions. I really believe this most of the time. But the young people are hearing, you don't trust me. And so one of the things I like to say about that is experience is a better teacher than advice. So sometimes we just have to simply, zip it. In fact, the book is called Doing Life with Your Adult Children, Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out. And I've told people there are scars on my tongue. I don't think you can see them, all the way across the pond, but there's scars on my tongue because frankly, Cathy and I are usually right. But we have a daughter who's gotten engaged in the last week. And I was texting with her about the wedding. And I said, now, of course, this is your wedding and we want to come alongside you. And then I caught myself giving her 3 suggestions. I'm texting her. She lives in New York City. We live in Southern California. And then I went zoop, and I just erased all 3 of those things because they may come up. There was a American movie that was popular all over the world. It was called Field of Dreams. It was about a man building a baseball diamond in the middle of a farm area. And he said, if you build it, they will come. What I say is, if you keep your mouth shut, they will then come and begin to talk to you. I think yesterday I had 3 conversations with all of my girls, and they were more on a mentoring level. So, and they're in their 30s. So it moved from, being in control, or at least part of the control with me as a parent, to moving to kind of a coaching them and consulting. And then really now it's more of a mentor. I can care for them. And I love that they ask me those questions. But, there's times when I have an opinion. And I even said to my daughter, Christy, once, she's my oldest, and I said, hey, can I have permission to talk into this? And she said, not now. And I go, wait, people pay me to give advice. I didn't say that to her, but I thought that again in my head. And, sometimes we just have to keep our mouth shut. So that's another one that's a really important one. The third one is we have to be students of the culture. And I know we're going to talk about this much, but the culture has changed. So your kids are Gen Z, my kids are millennials. And as parents, we're just trying to get through Thursday. Let's face it, when the kids are younger, we're trying to get through Thursday. And then we go, oh my gosh, it's Friday and we got to start all over again. So, in the hassle, we don't take a step back and see what their culture sometimes is saying to them. So, for example, Gen Z's, your kids' culture, those kids, there are twice as many atheists in Gen Z as there are in millennials, and millennials have been leaving faith. So, as a parent, we want to make sure that we understand that, that we do have to become students of the culture. And then another one is, I asked this question, how to raise an entitled adult child or not. And what I say is, and this is the theme, and I love this theme, they will never know how far the town is if you carry them on your back. So I know a lot of parents, and this is actually, you start this when the kids are younger. You've got to take the monkey off of your back and place it squarely on theirs. They've got to have some responsibility. Are they going to win all the time? No. We like I said, experience is a better teacher than advice. They've got to experience it. We've all experienced through sometimes our failure. See, and I think that's a key one. Parents sometimes enable their kids toward dependency still on them because they're still giving them money, they're still taking care of things, they're still paying for the cell phone. When in reality, of course, we want to come alongside our kids. And by far in the world, at least in the Western world, 75% plus help their adult children out, maybe with university or other things. But the fact of the matter is that the bottom line is they need to become responsible adults, or they'll have a failure to launch. And of course, that's another principle. And the big one, and we can talk about this later, but the big one, I would say the biggest one that people end up talking to me about is when your grown child violates values. And one of the things I say, Karen, is you can't want it more than they want it. That's so hard because, especially if your kids are violating values. I talked to a woman the other day whose daughter was in the university. She moved in with her boyfriend. She was raised in the church, was actually a real leader in the youth group. Parents are real leaders in the youth group. And this girl moved in with her boyfriend. And what I say to them is, you can't be a one topic parent. Do they know what you believe? Yes. Do they know how you? Yes. Well, then broaden it, because when they crash, and most of the time they do, you want to be a safe person. That doesn't mean that you compromise your values. You don't, I have biblical worldview. I have biblical values. So with my kids, I'm going to stay with my biblical world values, but I know a lot of people don't live by my values that I still can love and care for. See what I'm saying? So I think we keep the relationship, and some people would disagree with me on that. And then, there's other ones on becoming financially responsible. Because again, the bottom line is that they become responsible adults. So you got to talk about finances, in-laws. What if you don't like the boyfriend or the girlfriend or the husband or the wife as they get older? What if you have problems with the ex, or because there's, today's family looks so different than, a traditional family sometimes. Cathy and I have been married 46 years and we have 3 kids, and we literally have a white picket fence. That's not the norm, obviously. So now families have to think about that. And I love that principle. It's wear beige and keep your mouth shut. And I asked a woman one time, because I have all daughters, what did you do for your son's wedding? And she goes, I wore beige and kept my mouth shut, because she wasn't in charge. I love that. But I use that principle. And then the last principle is about grandparenting. And you're not there yet. I am. And it is a great season. And I just say, be the party time grandparent to your grandkids. And it may be your greatest legacy. I'm now looking at my life with our little James 5, Charlotte 3, and Huxley, a good British name. Huxley, 6 months. I think that may be Cathy's and my greatest legacy. So those are the principles. And I did a quick thing on it. But even in those principles, we can learn some things as parents to go, wow, that may be something I need to look into farther, or maybe I need to tweak something. And that's why I bring those up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's so true, because I remember driving home with my daughter yesterday, and she was talking about the struggles she was having in school and all. And as she began to talk, I remember what your book said, zip the mouth, listen, because my instinct was just about to say, you know what, I give her my advice, tell her this is what you should do. And I thought, if I should say this, she's going to say, Mommy, you're not listening again. You're trying to criticize, you're trying to, So I thought, and I could actually feel myself biting my lip, like, yeah.
I've done that. I've even said to Cathy, who gives great advice, but I'll say to her, principle number 2, real quietly, and she goes, oh, right, and we fail. I mean, every parent is going to continue to give advice, but what you're doing, listening is the language of love. It's the language of love if you're married. To your spouse, a lot of times it's the language of love. And I'm the guy who says to my kids, but why do you need to go to Europe to find yourself? I have all the answers for you right here. Mm-hmm. and I kind of do, but I sometimes need to go, no, you need to figure out this for yourself, because when your daughter hears you listening, she knows you have answers, but when she hears you listening, she sees that as an act of love for you. And sometimes that's what they need more. In fact, even when they violate values, what's the number one thing they're still asking? Do you still love me? Well, you show love sometimes by listening, not by just being the one topic parent about whatever the thing is that's breaking your heart.
So true. Yeah. And you describe in your book the moral decline we see in the culture of our children and young adults as a cringe factor.
Yeah.
So what do parents need to understand by this?
Well,
I know you talked about a little bit about it.
Sure. I mean, the culture has changed rapidly. And you and I were talking the other day about the fact that I actually spent some time in Great Britain, and I actually saw some of the cultural issues around sexuality, cohabitation, things like that, actually earlier than even here in the United States. Today, it's here rampant as well. But parents were shocked because when I was growing up, I'm a lot older than you, but when I was growing up, even my parents who were not Christians still had a worldview that said you don't move in with each other. So say cohabitation. You know, today in the United States, I don't know the statistic for the rest of the world, but in the United States, about 75% say that they would live with someone before or in marriage or instead of marriage. Now, studies show that if people do cohabitate, for example, greater chance of divorce if they get married, greater chance of adultery if they get married because they were already compromising some values, and actually even less sexual satisfaction. But our secular world here in the United States can't promote those findings because it goes against kind of their moral issue. Yeah. So as parents, I think it's important for us to study, why do kids act the way they act? Who's influencing kids? And again, that doesn't mean that they're not gonna, like in our we've just gone through a fun, crazy, weird election. You guys have yours too. And a lot of our younger kids went one way and some parents went much different. An older generation went, had some other thoughts, younger generation had. Well, as a parent, I have to understand that. How are they being influenced? When we sent our kids away to university, they came back with some different worldviews than they got in Sunday school. I'll just tell you that right now. But we're still the greatest influence. But we can't do it just from dialogue, but also from lifestyle and having conversations. And so I think the cringe factor says that we're seeing an uptick in cohabitation. We're seeing an uptick in pornography. Today, pretty much when you look at this, and I speak a lot, I don't know if you know this, but one of my major topics is on sexuality, children's sexuality, teen sexuality, things like that. And so, the statistic for us in the US is that the average kid sees pornography at age 11. Boys around 10, girls around 12. But I didn't say some kids, pretty much today because of internet culture, whatever, pop-ups, they're going to see it. So the cringe factor for a parent is saying, if we didn't have conversations with our kids, I'll always say to parents, how many of you received good, positive, healthy, value-centered sex education from your parents growing up? Oh, hardly anybody raises their hand. I mean, in fact, I remember being in Great Britain before COVID, speaking at a conference, and I asked, there were probably 2,000 people in the room, and I think there were 8 people raised their hand, right? So their parents didn't talk to them. So where are they getting it? Well, it used to be from friends or from a book or whatever. Today it's from the internet. The greatest distributor of internet pornography is the cell phone. And again, the greatest new users are boys ages 12 to 17, and girls are right behind them. So the point that I'm saying is that's the cringe factor for parents, because if a kid saw pornography at age 11, that's his or her sex education. See, so we're cringing there. We're cringing with some of the gender issues. We're cringing with, some of the things that, today our Christmas table when we're eating looks different with younger kids because they have one view, we have another, and, it can heighten. So again, that's why I say we have to be students of the culture, not because we're going to fix it all, but to actually understand why they act the way they act and what they're thinking.
Yeah.
And they still want to know. The greatest influence in a child's life is mom by far, and then dads. And dads are actually a distant second. So we need to buck it up. And then it's grandparents. So it's not just culture and it's not just their friends. So as parents, that's a beautiful thing. But to do that, we'd better study their culture. So I was, in my past life, I was involved in student ministry, and that's what I did. My dissertation in Great Britain was on youth ministry, actually. And so what I used to do was talk to the kids. I would say, what's the latest music group? Because I want to know who's influencing them. And I think as parents, we can do the same thing. And it doesn't even have to be personal if they're taking it negative. at school, what's everybody listening to at school? What do they think about this? And then you get to hear about it. So, I think that's the cringe factor. I haven't met a parent. This sounds like a major statement, but I haven't met a parent who doesn't have a little bit of a cringe factor with the way their kids are growing up within the culture. Sometimes as Christians, again, I'm coming from a Christian worldview, as Christians, we just whine and complain about the culture without actually saying, no, we can do something about it. We still are the most important influence. So I realize that even if my kids had a different view, I'm a very strong influence in their life. And so, if I do it in the right manner, we can have some good conversations about it. But I'm going to cringe, you're going to cringe, that's how we do it.
So true. So true. Yeah. And then can you elaborate on the term, the messy middle?
Yeah.
For example, when a parent or guardian is trying to hold on to solid moral base, while at the same time loving their child or young adult who has chosen a different lifestyle to the Christian values they hold.
Right. Well, I use the term messy middle because I think we get stuck in it a lot of times, because I'm very strong. So I'm very conservative when it comes to certain things, like you're talking about theology and certain things. I have strong beliefs. And if a kid, mine or somebody else's, has a very different view, so one option is to shun them and to say, well, I disagree, and have arguments, and that's not going to really go anywhere. Or do I stay in the messy middle? Do I not compromise my values? But is it possible to embrace them, not embrace their values? It's, I said a phrase earlier that's really important to me. Do they know what you believe? Yes. Do they know how you feel? Yes. Now love on them. I said to a father whose son was totally messing up, smoking pot, just going a different way. And I said, does he know what you believe? Yes. Does he know how you feel? Yes. The guy loves baseball, and our baseball season is just starting. And I said, well, then it sounds like you need to take him to a baseball game and just have fun. And he went, I know, but how do I get him off of, smoking pot? I said, well, part of it is continue the relationship, because rules without relationship equal rebellion. And so sometimes we're too rigid in our parenting, and I know you'll talk about this in the other aspects of it, but, in terms of parenting, we can either be too rigid or too lenient. What we need to do is empower them to make good decisions, but we do that by keeping the relationship strong. And I love that. My dad, who was not necessarily raised, he was not a Christian. I became a Christian when I was 16, not outside of the family. But my dad was really good with my brothers, who were a little wild and crazy. He still loved them, even though he disagreed with them. And I learned a lot from a man who didn't, he didn't even have a Bible to, throw at him. But what he did was he still loved them and had a relationship outside of the one topic. A lot of us become one topic parents. And I see this with moms. They're heartbroken by a decision that their kids made. And so then they become the one topic parent. And I understand it's the main thing on their mind, but they've got to broaden that because their kids are doing more to life. I remember my daughter, Becca, who's now a clinical psychologist and a wonderful Christian, and she lives in New York City. But Becca was having a tough time in college. We kind of laughed because she was at a Christian college and we spent time with pastors' kids, which was scary, her and them. And every Tuesday, my wife teaches Bible study on Tuesday nights. And so every Tuesday I was driving an hour and a half, and I'd have dinner with her. I always had a list. But what I found was she wanted to talk about snow skiing, and we live by the beach. She wanted to talk about surfing and a new boy and all this. And I'm like, no, the core issue is this. And sometimes I went, well, I don't know if it was worth it. I just drove 3 hours round trip to talk about surfing and a new boy. You know what I mean? No, it was worth it because I was building that relationship. So then when she felt safe and able to have some conversations, we could do it. Now, again, she knew what I felt. I'm not telling people to put that aside. I am just saying you don't have to say it over and over and over again. They know, they heard you.
Yeah. And I love what you've just said. Connection is so important. Having building on those communications.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's only then that they're able to truly understand how you feel and where you're coming from when there's a relationship.
Yes. Totally.
Yeah. And just moving on from that, in our parenting masterclass called Nurturing the Hearts of a Child for Leadership, one thing we teach parents is the importance of connection before correction, and that building relationships and being mindful of how we communicate to our children is extremely important. So can you give examples of how, I know you've said it a bit about it, but can you give examples of how a parent can actually nurture a child's heart? You know, I know you've talked about that.
Well, nurturing a child's heart is critical. And I think you do that partly by, when you say connection, the word is intimacy, connection. Women understand this. I speak on marriage too. And sometimes I wrote a book called Creating an Intimate Marriage, and women will go, oh, wow, it's on connection. Men go, oh, it's on sexuality. This is great. But it's much more, you know, so intimacy means, to develop intimacy, it means you spend time with them. I found over the years that there were certain rituals that came in our family. Like, so for my girls, I went out on a date with Cathy once a week, but I also went out on a date with my girls. And so that's 4 hours, say, of dating, so to speak. You know, we all have busy lives. And, you know, I can't say that every time I would go out I went out to breakfast a lot with my oldest, Christy. We were just talking about this. And she said, you were doing that for kind of bond. She has kids now. You were kind of like trying to bond with me. I just thought we were getting a free breakfast. But those times, 1 out of 3 times, we would have this amazing conversation about something for part of it. The other rest of the time, we're talking, you know, this was teenage years. We're talking about the same thing, boys and, you know, what's going on at school and complaining about a teacher and all that. And I'm just listening. But, you know, they understand that when you're willing to, you know, to connect with them in that way. And at night, I would try to have a connection time as a dad, because again, I was working out of the house. Cathy is a teacher, and her background, she actually became a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and then she went back to work once our youngest was like just about ready to go to university. So they had mom at home. They didn't have me at home. And so at night, I'd have some time with them. Sometimes I just, you know, it was the best type of conversation. Sometimes I could kind of rub their back, or we'd do whatever. And then I would pray with them. And they didn't always, as they got older, they didn't always want to pray. You know, they would let me do it. But it was interesting because it's not my background, but I would kind of put like the sign of the cross on their forehead, and not anything weird or ritual, but I would just do that. And Christy, when she was about 22, had been she already graduated from the university, and she'd been in a broken relationship with what she thought was going to be her, you know, the love of her life. She was in bed one day back at our house. They boomeranged back. And I said, Christy, can I pray for you? Because I knew she was having a real tough time. And she said, oh, I'd love that. And I wasn't praying with her every night as a, you know, young adult. When I finished, she grabbed my hand and went like this. I had never known that was a big deal. So that connection time, and now I'm watching her. She does it with her kids. She has 2. She has our James and our Charlotte. We say our because we love these kids. But how interesting that tradition is a tradition of connecting. And so I think it's in the little things. I mean, I could say, go on a great trip, take a hike, you know, do this, but I think it's actually in the connection times. You know, my wife and I got in the habit during COVID of taking our dog for walks. And usually we're efficient. Why don't you take the dog for a walk and I'll get dinner going, and then, you know, not doing it together. And during COVID, we've decided that our dog loves us much more than any other dog we've ever had, because he's been on more walks. But, you know, we connect when we walk the dog. I mean, people say they'll look for great amounts of, you know, they'll pay a great amount of money for counseling. And I'm saying, well, actually, you know, take your dog for a walk, you'll connect. Cathy and I had the best conversation yesterday as we were walking our dog. The day before, we actually walked our dog to a place nearby. Now, remember, we live at the beach, so there's great sushi. And so we went to a little sushi outdoor restaurant with our dog, and then we walked back, and it was a beautiful time. But those are building on time. See, so I'm saying find times that are more what I like to call spontaneous relationships. But to do that, you got to put time into it. So people would always say to me, my friends who kind of do what I do, they would go, wait, you do a date every week with your kids? And I go, oh, we missed it. They got sick, or I was traveling or whatever. But by far, those are good times. And so it's not anything with the sexy words. We can all do that. It just means, how do you juggle that? And you really do have to juggle it. And it still goes on. My wife has moved her Bible study on Tuesdays to Wednesdays. So you and I are having this conversation on a Wednesday. And so I called up Christy, who just had a little surgery. And I said, hey, can Steve take the kids? And can you and I, you know, go get something to eat tonight? And we'll do it really early, so you can be back by, you know, 6:30, earlier than most times people would eat. And she goes, oh, I'd love that, Dad. Well, I can't do that all the time, and I shouldn't do it. She has a husband, she has kids, but I just knew that after this little surgery that she had, she probably, needs some cheerleading on, and she jumped at it. And even Steve said to me, "Hey, thanks for doing that. That's awesome." He goes, I want a date like that." He's my son-in-law. I went, "You got it, guy," because those are the times.
Yeah, so important. And it's really like being intentional, really.
Yeah, well, it's connection without correct. I mean, if you correct, it's what you're teaching. If you're going to give them correction, you're going to have consequences. There's going to be a little bit of punishment or whatever for what they do. I understand that. But if you have a relationship with them, that's not going to change the relationship, because you have a connection. You can't be their best friend. I mean, I say to people about this all the time, you can't be your kid's best friend. You're too old. They think you're old. So we don't think you're old, and you don't think you're old, but your kids do. I don't care what age your kids are. And so again, don't try to be their best friend. You know what? As I've watched Cathy, my wife, as my girls have gotten older, it's more of a friendship. So not a friendship when they were, 18, 19, 20, 21. It was still and actually was somewhat conflicted. They were in some conflict just because of stuff. But today, that's a different story. They're calling her up, and she is more like a mentor, but she's also, I love this. My daughter Heidi came down. She lives in Los Angeles. We live in Orange County, which is about 65 miles away. And she came down and spent a couple of days because she needed Cathy to do some babysitting while she was working. And they did a bunch of friend things. They figured out how to take the baby to go get some coffee and do these things. And I just love that, because that wasn't the case when she was 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah. So it does change. We see it changing in the 30s.
Yeah, but actually you still even see it when they're 18, because I'm seeing it right now. I mean, I know I don't have as much control over my older daughter as I used to. I've really got to allow her, like one of your principles says, just let go.
Release them.
Release,
Well, you release them to come back in a different way. And so your 18-year-old, if her love language is going to get coffee or going to get going shopping or whatever it might be. So periodically you have one of those moments, you can go, that was a beautiful moment. And you're still the most important, and anybody who's watching this needs to understand that as parents, you're still the most important influence in their life. Soon they will one day get married, and that will change. But all the studies, all worldwide, say that parents are the most important influence, and especially when it comes to the spiritual side too. So I think it's important. They want to, they want to keep that relationship up. They just don't want us to take over and tell them always what to do.
And just going on to the next question, I love this story that you share about the older farmer saying grace for the morning man's breakfast. I read it over, I've read it like 3 times, and I love each time. And I believe it is because I can relate to how hard it is for blended families to blend, being one myself. So what advice will you give to parents and step parents as they parent adult stepchildren?
Well, first of all, don't expect it to be perfect. In a blended family, a husband and a wife fell in love, and the kids didn't necessarily fall in love with the blend. And in fact, they might still be praying that the blend wasn't going to happen or whatever. And so I think it's important that we don't rush into that we rush them into thinking, oh, everything's going to be great, because you do have some extra issues there. There's an ex someplace, and typically there's, some other in-laws, and there's, it makes it more complicated. Embrace that complication and realize that it's going to take a while to make this thing happen, but it can be good. But it's not going to be what sometimes we dream it to be. In fact, sometimes some of us who work in the world of parenting don't use the word blend anymore, because blend says, oh, it's going to be great and it's going to be really quick. And that prayer that you talked about, and I can't bring it up totally, but I love that prayer too. And I love putting it in the book, because it was an old farmer who prayed, and it made the pastor was like very nervous about it, because the farmer said, I don't like lard, and I don't like flour, and all these things he doesn't like. What is this about? He goes, but when you blend it together, it makes a beautiful biscuit, and I love biscuits or whatever. So, but the point being is, let it blend. Take the time, let it figure, kind of figure this thing out and work on it like crazy. But also don't let what I always say to people who are in a blended situation, don't let the ghosts haunt you. Get rid of those ghosts, do the work. You'll never have a good, marriage in a blended family if you still let the ghost still kind of haunt you, the ghost of whatever the pain was that caused the first time. And I think it's important to make sure that you're working on that, and not just the kid and not the kids. And then I think the word grace means unmerited favor. I think we have to give each other a lot of grace when it comes to families that are blending, because everybody wants to try, but we kind of walk on eggshells sometimes. And I think it's really key. The phrase that I said, and I laughed about it when I was giving it to you, is, wear beige and keep your mouth shut. And I think a lot of times in a blended family situation, if it's not your blood family, then what I oftentimes say is, be the greatest cheerleader, be an asset. There's a woman here in our office who's in a blended situation, and she was having real trouble getting with her daughter-in-law. And so, because it's kind of a second daughter-in-law, and there's just some things going on. And I said, doesn't she like coffee? She goes, yeah. I said, why don't you give her a Starbucks card? And so she did a thing for like 2 months. She just, every week she'd stop by and give her a Starbucks card. And finally the woman said, hey, why don't we go to coffee? They're like best friends now. Well, what happened was she just kind of poured into her life, and she became kind of a second mom. She didn't try to replace her birth mom, who this woman is a lot more together than the birth mom is. But she just kind of came alongside of her and didn't judge some of the silly things this young woman is doing. Well, that gave her instant access to her son and to a child that is, kind of within the blend as well. That's an important thing to know. So I think, blend works as long as we can take a deep breath and say a principle that I love. This principle: does it really matter? Because everything doesn't matter. And when you're in the blend, you're going to have to let some things go. The other thing I say about blend, and this is more on parenting than it is what we're talking about today, but when it comes to the kids just being a little bit younger, is, sometimes people even get married because, well, I need somebody to come in and discipline. So I need my husband, who's not the blood father, if you would, the birth father. I need him to be the big disciplinarian. No. He needs to be the one who kind of comes along in a different way than the mom who, say, was the birth mom. And she'll just have to take on a little bit more of that, because again, he didn't birth them. So you want to be a team, but at the same time, you don't want to cause, deep tension. And so you got to figure out, so it means you got to talk about discipline, consequences, talk about who's going to do what and what the roles are really differently. Well, we should all talk about roles, but you got to really especially talk about roles in a blend.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. So in your book, you talk about the importance of establishing healthy boundaries. I mean, just like what you've said now, being if you're in a blended family, holding a child accountable and expressing your expectations. I think this can be extremely difficult, especially when a teenager has finished college and returns home, or is over 20 years and is still living at home. So can you give practical examples to help support parents who are struggling?
Sure. Well, that happened, Karen, when COVID came here in the United States. Several million kids moved back home and weren't planning on moving back home. And parents didn't know what to do. So typically the kid reverted back to the teenage years, and the parents reverted to treating them like the teenage years. These were young people who had different nighttime hours or whatever. And now the parents are saying, no, you need to be in by 10:30. And they're going, 10:30, we just get started at 10:30, whatever it might be. Well, I'll give you a personal illustration. It was our daughter, Becca, who's our middle child. And she had graduated from college. She would have been a missionary for 8 months in Ecuador. And then she came back, she lived with us for a little bit, and then she got a roommate. And the young girl, after about 6 months, moved, I think, back in with her parents. So Becca didn't have a place to stay. So she goes, hey, can I come back for a little bit, maybe 2 months? We said, we would love to have you. We called her our roomie. And so when she came back, we had a meeting. And we said, hey, we got a couple of things we want to talk about. She's not used to that because we didn't have those kind of meetings as much when she was younger, and hadn't while she was in college as much. We said, here's the deal. I said, see this bucket? It has a toilet brush. And she's laughing. I go, I'm not sure you've ever seen one of these, but the toilet by your room is now your toilet. That bathroom is yours. And we actually respect you enough to have you decide to do it. We actually had somebody who came and helped, not with that bathroom. We wanted Becca to learn this. So we kind of laughed about that. And I said, we know you have later hours. So mom and I are going to be up worrying about you at whatever time. So we just need you to text. We understand that if you're at a friend's house, you're watching a movie, you're doing something, she wasn't doing horrible stuff. Let us know. And if you don't text, we're going to be really frustrated. But we think that that's how you honor this relationship. And then we frankly are asking for 2 nights or 2 meals a week, because she didn't want to spend all her time with us. She goes, I can do that. On the spur of the moment, I just said, and by the way, do you have anything for us? And I honestly thought she would go, no, you guys are great. Thanks for, bring me back into the house. She goes, I do. She looks at Cathy and she said, now, I think you give me too much advice and this and that. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's killing my wife. And I'm like, she's true. It's true what she's saying, and it's good, healthy. Cathy's taking it great, but I'm sure she's going to go, and Dad, you are the most blessed. She goes, and Dad, I'll bring friends over and you just come in and sit on the couch and kind of like join the conversation. I didn't invite you into this conversation. You need to back off. We've got a big enough house where there's another room there. And I just I do that. I would just go, hey, I was a youth pastor. And so I would just sit in with all of her friends and join the party. And she had some other things too. But what was really good about that was, did she text us every time at 11 o'clock? No, frankly, she didn't. She messed up sometimes, but we had permission to text her and say, hey, are you going to be, back? And we wanted her to respond to text. The point that I'm saying is sometimes we just have to, most of these problems are because we have unexpressed expectations. So I think we have to lay down our expectations, and here are our boundaries. Now, boundaries that you also have to have, I believe, as a parent, especially when we're talking about values, is, hey, this is our home. So, you're not going to, if the kids are violating values big time, they're not going to let their boyfriend, with us, our girls, this was not their problem, but we would not have allowed them to have boys sleeping in the same room in our home without marriage, you see. And so we had to, have those kinds of conversations. Now our kids aren't in that school yet, or weren't in that school, I should say. So we didn't have to do that. But we even had rules with our kids as they were growing up, is that if they had a boy over, and we had plenty of boys wandering around our house, doors in the bedrooms couldn't be closed, and just little things like that. Those were boundaries. Did my girls go, these are the greatest boundaries ever? No, they rolled their eyes. They went, you guys are the most conservative people I've ever known. Movies, things like that. We weren't trying to be their best friend. We were trying to guide them toward responsible adulthood. And we had to give, and they had to give a little bit. So yeah, that's the personal illustration with good old Becca.
That is so true. Thank you so much. Really, really, I have really learned a lot, and I'm really grateful for the time we've actually spent here.
Yeah.
And I know parents can actually access your book because we've got a link at the bottom of this video where they can go to get this book and other resources, because you speak on marriages, you speak to leaders, you speak to children's ministries. And so you have a wealth of resources on your website. And so they will be able to find your website at the bottom of this video if you check the link. But before you go, we want you to please give parents and any other persons listening right now a challenge, really, a take home. I know you've spoken a lot, just to give them a take home as something that they can do right now.
Yeah. Well, I could think of about 12 things. You can tell I'm not shy about having conversations, but I think a lot of parents have to make sure. A woman said to me one time, I was speaking at a large conference, about 8,000 kids, and she came up and she said, I have a phrase for you. And that's always scares me. I'm like, what is this phrase? Whatever. Is my zipper down? Did I say something wrong or whatever? And she goes, I think the Lord wants me to tell you that untended fires soon become nothing but a pile of ashes. And I went, that's totally for me. Because what she was saying was, if we don't tend the fire within our own soul, if we don't take care of our own soul, moms, dads, with hockey dads, soccer moms, football moms, but if you don't take care of your own soul, then you're going to be of no benefit for your kids. So a lot of parents are so, they're such giving people and such serving people that they're not taking care of their own soul. And so they're nothing but a pile of ashes. So when that woman said that to me, I realized I needed to take time for my own soul. I needed to take time to be emotionally, spiritually, physically as healthy as I possibly could. I needed to make sure, as a married person, I realize there's people who are watching this that aren't married. And I think, by the way, single parents are some of the finest parents around. But for me, I needed to make sure that I was investing in my relationship with Cathy. I would be a better husband or father. Now, the other thing that I think is, I think we need replenishing relationships. You used a phrase before I think we went on. We were talking about it takes a village. Well, you know, I've got 4 other men. I've met with them for 21 years every Tuesday morning. And these are some of the most incredible men I've ever met. They are my heroes, my mentors, my friends, we're peers, and yet in some ways they're mentors to me. And I'm a better husband and a better father because I'm in an accountability relationship with them. And so I don't think we were meant to do parenting alone. I don't think we were meant to do marriage alone. And so I'm so glad that there's organizations like yours, Karen, and others where you can come and get help and get resources, but also build relationships. Because you know, there have been times we were in a small group with couples, and man, that was the best thing for our marriage, because we were able to talk, and somebody would say, oh my goodness, we had this conflict, and Cathy and I are looking at each other going, wait, we had the same conflict, and we could learn and dialogue with each other and show grace. So I think it's taking care of our own soul. That's not selfish. A mentor in my life, his name is Gary Smalley. He's passed away now, but Gary always used to talk about self-care. And another friend used to say, we all need to work on self-leadership. So he said 50% of we're all leaders, whatever we're doing, and 50% of that should be done on your own self, meaning working on your own leadership, taking care of your soul. And I think the people who do that are the most effective when it comes, and nobody's perfect, but they're the most effective when it comes to parenting. They're the most effective when it comes to marriage, and frankly, the most effective when they come to do their leaders. But the people who are always exhausted, worn out, fatigued. We have a American football coach who was now passed on. His name is Vince Lombardi, and he said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. So I think sometimes the biggest problem around the world is this breathless pace in which we live our lives. Maybe some of us need to stop that merry-go-round that we're on and slow it down a little bit. So that would be my word to parents. Go a little easier on yourself. And the last thing I would say is, even kids who make poor choices, they have some great parents. So great parents can have kids who make poor choices. You can't put all the blame on you if your child is, you know, making some poor choices. They're, especially when we're talking about adulthood, because they're, as adults, they're going to make some poor choices. Most of us did. That's the way it is. We still love them, and that's exactly what Jesus would do as well.
Yeah, so true. So parents, there you go. That's our assignment. And whatever it looks like for you, I want you to just put it in the chat. Write down what it is you're going to do to take care of your own soul. And also whatever thing what was your aha moment as you listen to this session today? Just write it out in the chats. Let's build each other up. Let's encourage one another, because like we've just said, sometimes it takes a village or even a community to do parenting together. And it also makes you feel that, I'm not alone here, we've got company, and this is a very safe place in the parenting community. So write down what you're going to do. So thank you, Jim. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for what you're doing with Manthano. It's really a great organization, and I just appreciate all the resources you have for people. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Yeah, take care and God bless.